I'd like this weekend to do all of Sam Neill's back catalogue. An incredible actor with a great sense of purpose and community, and was a lifelong union member and a really big advocate for working people and collective action, and probably speaks to my unachieved... One second, sorry. My wife's walking around in the background singing the Jurassic Park thing. I have to start again. Sorry.
Go. That's good. Hello and welcome to another episode of Socially Democratic. Before we jump into today's episode, I'd like to share some exciting news. First up, we're heading to the ALP National Conference in Adelaide, which is in late July, and we've got two live shows for you there. The first is part of the Fringe program, and we're getting into a big topic, party membership. How do we grow it? How do we keep evolving as a genuine people-based organisation? And if you got Fringe access, thinking you can just rock up first in best dressed. Then stick around, because at 5:15 Adelaide time, we're recording a live episode of the Feeney Files with Jesse McCrone, and that's at the Jade on Flinders Street. So it's actually in the city, not down at the conference. This one's at a ticketed event. It's $45 and tickets are on sale right now. They're limited. I think the venue only holds just a tick over 100. There are links to get your tickets in the show notes. So grab a ticket before they're all gone, and let's close out the conference together. It will be a lot of fun. Attention all social democratic women. As you know, the presenting sponsor of Socially Democratic and my day job, Dunn Street, runs an annual delegation of Australian social democrats over to Washington and New York each year. It's called the Dunn Street United States Engagement Mission, and this year will be our 6th mission. On it, Australian delegates get to meet folks from the Democratic Party, journalists on Capitol Hill, government officials, campaigners, organisers and industry leaders. And it's a chance to learn how people in the United States are confronting the challenges they face each day and bring those ideas back home to your own work. This year, along with the Dunn Street US Mission alumni, are proud to be sponsoring a seat that will specifically go to a woman from our broader social democratic and Labor movement family, someone who could not normally afford to attend or works at an organisation that couldn't normally afford to send her. And here's what it includes. The mission runs from the 27th of September through to the 3rd of October, so you need to be available to be in the United States across those dates. The sponsored seat covers everything on the program, your return flights to the United States and the full mission fee. The whole thing is taken care of. To be in the running, you need to apply. Applications close at the end of this month, the 31st of July, and the selection panel, made up of women who have previously been on the mission, will choose one lucky individual to join us in September. So to apply, click on the link in our show notes and get your application in as soon as you possibly can. And we look forward to seeing you in Washington this September. The presenting sponsor for Socially Democratic is Dunn Street. Dunn Street is a campaign agency that specialises in community organising. We only work with people and organisations who want to build power to make the world a better place. And if you want to create change in your world in 2026, then hit us up at dunnstreet.com.au. A special shout out to all of our Patreon members. If you want to join those wonderful supporters of our podcast and financially support our show so we can continue to produce great episodes every week, then we encourage you to click on the link in the show notes and subscribe to join the Patreon community of Socially Democratic. And finally, today's episode is brought to you by Maurice Blackburn Lawyers. For over a century, Maurice Blackburn has stood up for fairness, championing the rights of everyday Australians and shaping landmark legal reforms. Today, they're harnessing new technologies to make justice more accessible, more efficient, and more responsive to the needs of modern Australia. All right, let's get on with today's episode. We are taping this one on a Wednesday evening on the lands of the Wurundjeri people on a very cold Wednesday night in Melbourne. It is that time of the month again in which we do a mailbag episode. And how that works is we ask our Patreon subscribers to ask some questions of our two regular guests, and then they answer them. And we've got some interesting questions this month. one around AI, which actually was incredibly timely because the Prime Minister actually gave a keynote address on it today. One around nationalisation of infrastructure, and one around the Victorian election, which is getting ever so closer here in Victoria. And to help me unpack these mailbag questions, I'm once again, as always, joined by the former Chief of Staff to Premier Daniel Andrews and now a Managing Partner at FMRS Advisory, Lissie Ratcliff. Welcome back to the show.
Hey, Stephen.
And he is the Director of Campaigns and Strategy at Unions New South Wales and was my chaperone a couple of weekends ago. I was up in Sydney for the New South Wales Labor conference, and it was great to see him back on the show against Todd Pinkerton. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good, mate. It's good. It's a long time no see.
I know. It was a fun weekend, though.
Yeah, it was good. I hope you had a good time.
I did. I had a great time. You're
always welcome back in Sydney.
Thank you. And the show was good. The live show was good as well. A lot of fun. Now, actually, just some housekeeping, actually, whilst before we jump into this week's episode, just want to remind folks that are either living in South Australia or are going to the ALP National Conference next weekend. We're doing two shows. The first one's going to be on the Thursday afternoon, physically at the Fringe. I think it's at 2:00. The program, I think, is online now. And that's an episode that's going to be on discussing sort of Labor Party membership and growth and, you know, whether we need to be a big party and how do we get more people to join, and when they do join, what kind of experiences should they have and have they had. And the folks that are going to help me talk about that is Todd Pinkerton, as well as Hannah McLeod from the McCall Institute. You'll remember Hannah, she was part of our duo that did the South Australian election recaps each week. And Bisma Asif is joining us as well. But apparently there's a vote on around that same time. And so I don't know if I'm going to manage that, but she said that she was committed to making sure she had to vote at the time. Anyway, but we've got some diversity of views across Queensland, New South Wales and South Australia to talk about that. And then the second, and that one is just if you got a ticket at the Fringe, you get to just wander into that show. The second episode is actually on the Friday night at 5:15, and that's actually a part of the Fringe, but it's off campus. It's going to be at the Jade on Flinders Street. It's a ticketed event. It's a Feeney Files with Jesse McCrowan episode. It's $45 a ticket. There's links in our show notes to buy a ticket. Tickets are on sale now, so make sure. I think the venue only holds 100 people, so grab a ticket as soon as you possibly can. So just wanted to make sure that people knew about that. Anyway, enough about me talking about the future. Let's talk about the present. First question is from Canberra Paul. And Paul says, Prime Minister Albanese delivered, well, he said he's going to deliver a big speech, which actually happened today, on AI and what it means going forward. We haven't heard, we have now heard of it at this point, but he's saying, you know, should we have some legislation to provide some guardrails for workers and then the arts community and others. Ed Husick has been pushing on this for a while when he was industry minister. Businesses are saying that they should let it ride because it's not in our interests to, you know, if it's too regulated, then folks won't come and invest in Australia around data centres and that kind of stuff. You know, can we get some comments from the panel on this? So the Prime Minister spoke today and said a whole number of things in terms of addressing some of the challenges around protecting of artists and their IP. Also spoke about data centres, spoke about, you know, creating legislation that's going to regulate that, and sort of spoke about how when social media first kind of came on the scene, we kind of let it rip, so to speak, and it got away from us. And in this case, he's saying, I don't want that to happen with this next sort of wave of technology that's happening. Now, Ed Husick, when he was industry minister, you know, pushed this sort of harm-based AI-specific regulation. His 2024 proposal put forward this sort of 10 mandatory guardrails for high-risk AI, testing, transparency, human oversight, the right to challenge automated decisions, and wanted to create this Australian AI Act. and he was saying that sort of social license alone isn't doing enough and Australians distrust AI. My question to you guys, on top of what Paul's question was asking about, is based on what Ed Hughesy was talking about a couple of years ago, and then listening to what the Prime Minister said today, has his speech today achieved everything that Ed Hughesy was calling on when he was Industry Minister? And Lissie, I'll go to you first, or is it just a step in the right direction? What did you make from the Prime Minister's remarks?
So I think, it was a big speech from the Prime Minister today, and I think it was a shift or an evolution in the position that the federal government's taken about AI, because I think to date, or prior to this week, it's been more of a more of a neutral position, and where we're not anti AI, but and we're facilitating its sort of general economic rollout, for want of a better term, but we're not going to have a heavy-handed sort of interventionist regulatory approach to it. And I think today the Prime Minister's indicated that position is very much going to change. And I think in what he laid out today, there was some admissions that this is first in the world sort of things that nobody else has tried yet, let alone achieved. But I give him credit for saying, well, just because somebody else hasn't done it doesn't mean that we can't try it here. The regulation of social media for under 16s hadn't been tried anywhere else in the world before we did it here either. I think that the entire plan or vision that Ed Hughesy laid out, I don't think that has all been acquitted necessarily or taken up in what the PM's laid out today, but I think the spirit of it is pretty aligned, and I think that there's the PM today, there's a lot more work to do in this space, but I do think it's a fundamental shift from we'll let the market do what it wants to do and decide the destiny of this policy and the way it's going to impact every facet of our economy and our society, to the national government has a very clear activist role to play in this, and we're not just going to let it be a free-for-all and we'll see where we all end up. I think that is a much more Labor way to deal with it, which is to say it is not the government's position to control everything, but the government will put up guardrails to make sure that workers in the first instance, but also just Australians in general, have some level of protection around how this is implemented across the country.
Todd, we've I think on a couple of previous episodes we have touched on AI a little bit. What did you make of the Prime Minister's remarks today?
There's a few parts to it. I think it's very clearly that there's a shift in the approach and the shift in the language that the government is taking, and some of that is probably that they've been a bit cautious, I guess, maybe in the regulatory model or regulatory approach in the last couple of months. And there's definitely been, I think, also a greater shift in the community in terms of how people feel about AI. And we've talked about it on the show before that, I always think that people have like sort of two minds about the use of AI. In their personal life, they love the ability of ChatGPT to put together holiday itineraries or draft the speech they're going to give at their cousin's wedding or something like that. But then it's the integration into work and how it impacts them at work. That is, I think, this sort of second feeling or the second approach to it or how they've been engaged. There's definitely been, I think, a shift in the last couple of months about how people are feeling, particularly, and this is probably a result of how AI is now starting to be rolled out in a whole bunch of places where people don't feel like they have the same sense of control, where they're not opting into the use of ChatGPT to solve a problem. It's being required by them required by their employer in the workplace. We're also starting to see more and more of the dynamics of companies outwardly saying that they're creating layoffs or they're not hiring people because of their intention to use artificial intelligence. And there's a whole variety of jobs that people used to be told to go away and be trained for that are probably not even going to be needed now because of the nature of AI. We're also starting to see some flashpoints, and the Prime Minister today tried to land, I think, some pretty strong positions on both of them. I think they've both been welcomed pretty broadly. The first is on the data centres. Like, I think we're seeing more and more of these sort of flashpoints around data centres in local communities. There's been a real dynamic about this in America in the last couple of years about the impact it's having on utilities prices in communities. So we're starting to see sort of like local resistance around data centres being opened up. there's a balance there, right? The government is, both state and federal governments are talking about, Australia, I think, is the second most attractive destination for data center investment for a whole variety of reasons. And the government's today set some pretty clear guardrails around sort of the planning and the conditions about what energy use they're going to have, what the environmental controls are. The second that was mentioned today, and Stephen, you touched on this, is the sort of protections and royalties and copyright around artists. We were chatting in the sort of the pre-show about, there's increasing revelations of increasingly we're hearing about artists who are having their copyright or their music being used to train AI, and we're starting to see AI being used to make music. We're starting to see, I've been hearing about like shows that are being put on where people buy tickets to go see bands that actually turn out to just be like an AI produced live show. But we're also starting to hear from artists who are having their copyright or their intellectual property being used to train AI. Effectively, their IP is being used to replace their ability to do their work and their passion. So the Prime Minister also today made an absolute commitment there'd be no watering down on copyright. So for me, the sort of three takes were, one, there's a big shift in the tone. And initially, there are two big flashpoints that the government's tried to land today, both of which I think have been broadly accepted. There will obviously be criticisms that there's not enough, that it's going to be bolder, it's going to be bigger, there's going to have to be a lot more on the AI regulatory front. But I don't think this is going to be the last time we hear a big speech from the Prime Minister with respect to AI. I don't think this is the last time we're going to hear from a variety of ministers. I think they are attempting to meet the moment. And AI is it's a massive beast of a change coming forward, and it's going to touch on so many parts of our political and political economy. The government is going to have to set some strong guardrails, otherwise it's going to have to keep playing catch up.
Yeah, there's two. Just reading the immediate reports off the back of the speech, the two groups that are not happy with it. Interestingly, one is the FSU, the finance union, wants workplace AI laws. We can talk a bit about that in a minute. And the other group that's not happy with it is big business. So maybe you're on a winner when you've got employees and employers not pleased with it. But I want to talk about the big business one first. The Business Council Australia has sort of said, I guess they sounded a note of caution because they are, they're worried that if we overregulate it, it will turn off foreign investment from AI tech companies that are looking at Australia to invest here. And they point out Air Trunk, which had $42 billion they were looking at investing in Australia, but in the end they went to India. And so, I was sort of thinking when I was reading through the speech by the Prime Minister today, I was going, I just wonder, are all these, international tech companies they don't care about social license. They don't care about what kind of impact they're going to have. They just want to make money. They probably see this is the sugar hit they need. And maybe they're going to be put off by Australian government regulation. And that's the point that the Business Council was saying today. Lissie, what are your thoughts on that? I mean, actually, before you answer that, India, I've got a friend of mine in the United States who had said, don't just assume that investing in India is an easy process. India is a heavily regulated economy as well. And just because you think you can go and invest in India because it's cheaper wages, this person had privately said to me that when they eventually decided that they wanted to pull out of India, this was a stupid idea in the first place and they should never have done it. And it took them so long to try and pull out. They said it was easier for the American military to get out of Afghanistan than it was for their business to get out of India. So, maybe good, solid government regulation is actually possibly a good thing for people who want to invest in Australia, as opposed to the chaos that some of these other markets you would assume just because it's cheaper, that doesn't mean it's going to be easier. Anyway, what's your take on this from what the Business Council is saying?
Well, so a couple of things. I mean, one of the things that many things Australia and India have in common, and one of them is that we're both democracies. And in a democracy, one of the things that you are required to maintain is social license. And so I think for AI, and you talked about data centers before, it's just one example. They're not the only part of the AI boom, but they're obviously a big part. If you don't have social license built by engaging properly with a community in which you want to build any infrastructure project, and a data centre being the latest sort of iteration of that, then you're going to face significant resistance. And in democratic countries like Australia, and I'm going to assume like India as well, then if there is enough resistance at community level to these things, then eventually you get to the point where they become untenable for governments to pursue them. So one of the things that the government here is going to have to balance is regulation versus investment. I think the government is taking a sensible approach that investment at any cost is not the right way to go. It is not surprising that the Business Council has, probably an alternative view about that. I mean, they are effectively a union for big business. They represent their members. Their members are the biggest companies in Australia. Like, that's fine. That's their job. But their interests are not going to be the same necessarily as a local community, in the western suburbs of Victoria or, in Western Sydney, for instance, which are going to be the site of, already are, and are going to be the site of many more planned data centres. But I think at this point, anyone who is a data centre developer in this country who thinks that they don't need to do proper, genuine community engagement, both to understand the community in which they wish to build, but also to have a genuine plan for how they are going to make a contribution to that community. And I don't mean buying, new uniforms for the local footy team or something, like proper actual partnership that involves a lasting, substantial contribution. I think the window for that kind of approach to things is, if it is not closed already, it is very rapidly closing. Like, the tipping point for this now, I think, is here. And Todd, your point about, the American experience, I think is instructive. There are a large number of particularly Democratic members in the US who are now very much supporting a moratorium on all new data centres over there. That is the position of the Greens here in Australia. I think the federal Labor government is trying to take a much more constructive approach by both balancing investment with sensible regulation, but community engagement is going to have to be a proper part of that. Governments are going to need to mandate it, and proponents of data centres are going to have to actually make sure they deliver it properly. Otherwise, these things are not going to get built, and social licence will disappear, and community opposition will become really hard and absolute.
I think that's one thing that is missing from this particular announcement that was in a lot of the things that Ed Husick was talking about is protects job security and protection for workers with AI. And I noted when I was in Sydney for the New South Wales Labor conference, there was a fringe event on, and a very well-attended fringe event that obviously indicated there was a lot of interest in it around AI and job security. And there were a number of the unions, Jared Dwyer from the SDA, and a couple of other unions, plus Daniel Mookie, the treasurer, was speaking at this particular event and talking. And Dwyer was giving some examples about how AI has absolutely crept into workplaces where they are monitoring workers in the Amazon warehouses, and people are getting sacked because they found that they were only 99.3% efficient in their daily work. This nightmare scenarios that you think that would normally be happening in the United States, but has already started to come to the Australian industrial landscape. And so there's nothing been said about that in this this particular address by the Prime Minister. I'm just wondering, particularly with the ALP National Conference happening next week, whether unions are going to be sort of starting to agitate around the supreme making body of our party on getting a bit more out of the government on this one as well. Todd, what with your union hat on, what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I mean, almost certainly you'll see greater agitation around the need for us to address the way that AI AI is sort of a broad range for the whole use of digital systems. It's also it's algorithms and machine learning, and it's a whole variety of the new tech that's being used in workplaces. You're almost certainly going to see a larger degree of agitation around that. As I said, I don't think today is the be-all and end-all of the government's new posture when it comes to the use of AI. And as I've said before, I think people people might be fans of the technology in their personal life. I do not think that there is a strong social license for its rollout in the professional sector or in people's workplaces. So there's a whole variety of things that still need to be done and need to be addressed. I was listening to something the other day, we were just discussing about AI, which is almost certainly we are going to have to be more interventionist. Almost certainly we are going to have to put guardrails in, because regardless of what happens, AI is going to have a good day. Like AI is going to have a path, sort of a very strong economic force that's pushing it. But whether or not we as humans and we as workers have a good outcome out of it is entirely dependent upon what we do with the time that we have now to sort of get ahead of the regulatory settings. And the major part where that's going to have to take place is going to have to be in workplaces. Now, the Business Council has been jumping up and down as they tend to do, and it's presumably what they're paid to do, somewhat ineffectively. Going on and on about unions wanting a right to veto the technology in places. But I think the ACT made this point today. It's not a veto on the use of the tech; it's a veto on the harm that can be created from it. It's the hurt and the pain that can be brought on people, and the changes that the absolute degradation of the social license that the technology can have. That's what needs to have a veto over. There needs to be some guardrails in place on all of these things. Because in the broadest sense of all the conversations we've been having about upcoming elections and politics and how people are feeling, people I don't think are particularly hopeful about the economy going forward, or particularly hopeful about the labour market going forward, or the job market. And I think one of the major drivers is what they're seeing with respect to this technology. So there's a lot of change coming, and if we don't get our handle on it soon, the social license will go, and we'll end up. At the end of the day, the technology is meant to be working for us, not us working for the technology. So almost certainly you'll see more, but I also don't think that this is the be-all and end-all today of what you'll hear from the government on how they're going to respond.
Before I move off this topic, very quick question to both of you that's more of a trivial question. In what way has AI, in a non-work sense, inserted its life into your own life and made things far more efficient? For example, I've used AI to create a swim program for me, and now I've got a swim tracker, and I get the data from my Garmin after each swim and upload it into the tracker, and then it gives me coaching notes. And it doesn't pull any punches either. Like, it reads through and just even that third set, I think you were muscling your way through that, and I think your form probably dropped off a bit. And I was like, you really cut to the heart of me, Claude. You really know what's going on in my life right now. Is there anything that you have found that you've used AI to help make your life a little bit easier?
I use it for product research a lot. If you want to buy something about which you know nothing, as in like you don't know what model, like whether it's a car or a TV or like anything at all, and you say these are the things I think I want that are important to me, and then it will give you advice about those matters and say I don't think you want that one. But I've been interestingly surprised. I've been actually a little bit pleasantly surprised that it doesn't push you towards the highest price one. It's like you don't need to spend that much money.
There you go.
So having just spent a bunch of time talking about how we think AI is potentially problematic, we're now pushing it to everybody.
Here's 3 good use cases that work.
That's good. And financial planning, also not bad.
All right. Todd?
I will admit I have used it on occasion. My wife and I really enjoy the only thing we enjoy more than going on holiday is planning a holiday. And so one thing we have done is use it to kind of like map out like options. Like, particularly if we're like fighting over what we're going to do on day 3 of some trip somewhere or something. So it is it's quite good, but it's also quite fun because it gives you kind of a bit of options, and it can be quite enjoyable to use. That being said, it's actually no replacement for us actually just like breaking out a Lonely Planet and watching 100 hours of travel docos or something about the place we're going to go visit. So it's not bad. It's not bad, but it's definitely not a replacement for the actual good stuff.
If you haven't watched like 4 hours of YouTube videos about a place you're going to go, like have you actually done a real trip plan?
Right.
It's not really a holiday unless I've rewatched 3 Anthony Bourdain visits to that destination ahead of time.
Very good. Good question, Canberra Paul. Thank you. Okay, the second question is from Andrew, and Andrew asks us, the both of you, is there an appetite to nationalise critical infrastructure like telcos and have businesses that use that infrastructure pay for the privilege, and have businesses that use that infrastructure to pay for the privilege? I have read these before. I know that the McCall Institute has a paper on renewable power generation for this purpose, but what about other industries? Lissie, do you want to take a swing at this first?
Well, I guess I come at this from the perspective of growing up in a household where my dad worked his entire career at Telecom, which became Telstra before when it was privatised in the 90s by the Howard government. But do I think there is a burning appetite at the national political level to start nationalising industries? No, I do not. However, I think there is, and we've talked about this on the pod before, but there is a more and more of a push towards sovereignty and thinking about what does that mean for our critical resources and our critical infrastructure, and the state, the government's, therefore the country's ability to control that, particularly at times of crisis or difficulty. I don't know. I've had a quick look at that McKell report, and I don't know that anyone is necessarily going for that entire goal. But I would say that the government here in Victoria has re-enlivened the State Electricity Commission, the SEC, which back in the day owned and ran all of the coal-fired power plants before they were privatised, but has now been brought back as a vehicle that now invests in and owns renewable energy assets. So there's a big battery out in the northwest of Melbourne that was its first investment. So we talk about publicly owned energy, like that at least is a start back down that path of government-owned public energy infrastructure. It's not at the scale that it was, prior to the 90s where everything was state-owned, but it is a step in that direction. So I think there is a mood for it. I don't think the federal government's going to be racing to necessarily start buying up every wind farm in the country or anything like that. But I do think there's a bit more of a mood for it, that people don't trust that big business is necessarily going to do what's needed when things get difficult for the country.
Is there a mood for it? I feel like there isn't a mood for it in government world. I feel like there's a mood for it maybe in punter land, because people are concerned about cost of living and they sort of look at these private companies jacking up prices. I was just talking to some friends from overseas the other day when you travel overseas, and I know, if you get one of those eSIMs that you can just get online, they're so cheap, like, unlimited data for like, $10 for however long. And if you use Telstra, it's like $10 a day. It's like, where does Telstra get off in doing that? Like, it's just remarkable. And it's like capped at like, 3 meg a day or something. And it just reminds me of
network connectivity, Stephen.
Oh, no, it just reminds me of like, these examples of did in the end deregulation and sale of these government assets in the end do well for the consumer. What's your thoughts on this one, Todd? We're going to start buying back Qantas?
Not anytime soon, I don't think. Look, I don't know if there is a huge appetite amongst governments to buy back critical infrastructure, but I tend to agree, Stephen. There's a growing appetite, I think, in the sort of punter world or amongst everyday people, and I think partly because I think that like the conversation on privatisation has shifted drastically. Like I'm seeing this all the time in the conversations we have, where once there was a sort of public debate about the sort of the morality of privatisation and a question of efficiency and who could run what better or anything like that, to now I think most people see right through the sham that is privatisation, on the notion that the only reason a company would buy a product off a government of the day is so that they can charge more for it than what taxpayers were paying for it previously, right? So privatisation inevitably leads to higher cost of living. Australia's also got a very monopolised market, and that is because of where there have been privatisations of previously government-owned services that tend to be in natural monopolies. The only thing I would note is maybe this is outside the kind of critical infrastructure space, but I have seen, and obviously, Lissie, you mentioned this about in Victoria, there has been a growing move from Labor governments across the country to start bringing services or infrastructure back in hand. Like New South Wales, I think they're up to about 2 or 3 of the former prisons that have been privatised have come back in. The New South Wales government just brought back the Northern Beaches Hospital, which was a public-private partnership that had resulted in some pretty adverse and just really fatal and awful outcomes. So there has been a growing, I think, track record about bringing this stuff in, because often the view is that any attempt to bring it in is going to be more prohibitively expensive than just trying to regulate the better outcome. I don't know. I think that's another one where perhaps the social license around the delivery of government services is also changing, and you're starting to see more and more response from governments.
I think I think this will be a feature to some extent also of the Victorian election campaign. The government has been talking recently about the Liberal Party's track record in Victoria, particularly in health, which is that under the Kennett government they privatised 2 big regional hospitals, one of which the Andrews Labor government brought back into public ownership. They closed a whole bunch of others, and then they were preparing to sell off one of the biggest health services in the northern suburbs, which was only prevented by the Kennett government losing to Steve Bracks in 1999. So there is things come in cycles, but there was a big push for privatisation through the 90s. I think we're now in the counter-cyclical thing where that is not what people want to see for critical public services for those that are currently remain in public hands. And I think that would be certainly a feature of the election campaign here. And Todd, maybe the election campaign in your fair state a few months later into next year.
Perhaps.
Thank you, Andrew, for your question today. Okay, next question is from Claire. I think Claire's a Victorian because she says, help, I'm so nervous about the Victorian election. We can't rely on our poor competition. Why is the Premier unpopular? I genuinely don't understand. And what do we need to do to win this thing? We've obviously talked about, certainly on the Feeney Files with Jesse, we've spoken about Victorian politics a little bit. We try not to do it too much on this particular episode, just try and broaden it out a bit. We're getting closer and closer to the main part of the campaign. It's late November for those of you not familiar with when the election is here in Victoria. I said some things in the last episode. I feel like I've said enough. I want to throw it to you guys. Maybe Lissie, I'll get you to open it up, and then Todd, if you've got any questions as an outsider, perhaps you can ask the 2 Victorians. But I mean, Lissie, I don't know if you and I have spoken about it for a while. What is your take on Victorian state politics right now, and how are you feeling? Should Claire be nervous?
Well, it's an election year. We should all be nervous. If you're not nervous in an election year, you're not doing it right. That shouldn't be a feature of these things. You should be. I don't know. Every election I've ever been involved in, I've been wildly anxious, until the result was known, and that's for elections that were very close and for elections that were landslides. The way I felt in the lead up didn't really change, to be honest. So we should all be nervous. If you're a Labor supporter, or frankly, if you're a supporter of any party, you should be nervous. Elections are a big deal. We should all be anxious about them. Look, I think my take on Victorian politics is we've got 104, I haven't checked the counts, 140-something days to go, which is both a very short time and also a very long time, particularly it is a very kind of congested political environment at the moment. I think there is a very intense sort of focus from the Victorian media around the election. I don't know that Victorian voters are paying anywhere near that much attention at the moment. There is a 3 or 4, depending on which part of the state you're talking about, kind of contest going on. One Nation's obviously the big X kind of factor in all this. Nobody knows how that's going to end up, but they still don't have a leader. They still don't have candidates. For the most part, they still don't have policies beyond the sort of wild collection of things that the national sort of One Nation outfit has up on their website. So we don't know how that's going to roll out. But look, from my perspective, as I said, we've got a long way to go. I'd say to every Labor supporter who is a listener to this podcast, this remains a very winnable election for the Labor Party. And we should all, on take that, I think, and as an inspiration to just do everything that we all can to make that that the case. Like nobody's going to hand you an election victory. It doesn't matter what cycle you're talking about in what jurisdiction. That's not how it happens. You've got to work hard for it. You've got to believe that it's possible, and you've got to go out and chase every vote harder than your opponents. And if enough people do that with enough conviction, and you've got enough good ideas about what you want to do for the state, and you've got to, you can sell that message to people, then you've got a great chance. And I think we have, we still have a good chance of that here in Victoria. The government here has done a lot. There has been a lot being delivered. There is still more work to do, and I think without wanting to repeat all of your, I think, suggestions to people from a few weeks ago, Stephen, but my message to everyone involved in Victorian Labor, whether you're a staffer or an MP or a party official or a volunteer or a branch member, is like, if we do this together, then we can win this. And so we should all put our heads, get our heads down and get out there and do the work and put that case to Victoria, because the alternative is not something I think any of us want to see for the state that we live in.
There was a poll that was published, I think it was the Redbridge Accent Research poll that was in the Fin Review today, and it's just an interesting read on where how the electorate has moved over since December. Like if you go back to December last year, Labor's primary was in this particular poll was 31, the coalition was 40, and other was 17, and the poll that was just released, Labor's primary is 26, so it's dropped 5 points. The coalition is 26, so it's gone from 40 to 26. That's been whilst Jess Wilson has been the leader. She has overseen their primary in free fall.
Yeah, collapse, I think, is the word you're looking for.
Yeah, and not a lot. Like I read a bunch of really lovely, glowing articles, puff pieces in the Age over the weekend about her, and no mention about this at all. And obviously, One Nations has gone from bugger all to 27. They are now leading on the primary, and other is now 8. And I think the thing that I am interested in is like if it's if I've got a glass half full and a glass half empty basket. The glass half empty basket is there are more votes on the right side of the ledger than there are on the left side of the ledger. 26 for Labor and 13 for the Greens isn't enough to get you to 50. 26 for the coalition and 27 for the Tories puts, and they'll preference each other, you'd imagine. So in all these three-way contests, we're going to be in trouble, right? So it's glass half empty. Glass half full is that 27 for One Nation, I think, is incredibly soft. And the fact that the article by Chip Legrand following Jess Wilson, the leader of the Liberal Party here in Victoria, over the weekend, she's doing this she's visiting 88 seats, all 88 seats in the state, to show that she's hardworking and all that kind of stuff. The first bunch of seats that she focused on are all regional, Liberal or national heartland seats. Like she didn't start in like the Sandbelt or in the epicenter of seats you want to start taking off of Labor. It's all defensive. And that just tells me that they are shitting themselves. They're putting on a good show. She's putting on a good show. She's looking confident, but her actions suggest otherwise. And there's not a lot of hate being applied to them just yet, and there's not a lot of hate being applied to One Nation either. And I actually think that's the softness of that vote where I have hope, and that's where Labor wants to start to peel back those votes. And I think it'll be a similar kind of situation come not as dire as what's going on in Victoria right now, but for New South Wales, there is a growth of One Nation votes in New South Wales, and it's going to be a question that the Sussex Street's going to have to consider as well. And I think, I got a sense from when Dom Offner, the New South Wales General Secretary, was on the show the other week, he was kind of like, yeah, we're looking at Victoria because you guys are up next. And how we handle this One Nation thing is going to be a challenge for all of us, right? It's not just a Victorian problem. It's a national problem, and it's going to be a state-by-state problem as well. And so that softness, I have hope in that we can execute a good campaign strategy and a strong message that brings those voters back and back to Labor, not to the coalition. I said I wasn't going to do a rant. I just did one. Anyway, Todd, what's your outsider's perspective of looking at what's going on in Victoria? What do you think in terms of how things can be turned around, or what does it mean for New South Wales come March next year?
Yeah, I mean, I'd share Dom's view about, like, we're all looking to Victoria about this. It'll be the first sort of general election test about One Nation in this sort of recent the momentum that they've been gathering. I'd be really interested to, and I'm not privy to any polling in Victoria, I'd be really interested to see where the polling goes in light of what seems like some of that momentum is stored in the sort of One Nation federally. I also just from listening to the two of you, like, there's a few green shoots in all this, right? Like, we're 140 odd days, 130 odd days out. So people aren't even paying attention. A party with a quarter of the vote doesn't have any candidates yet, so people don't even know who they might be voting for. And, One Nation candidates tend to make the news occasionally. That's no excuse not to go and knock on doors. It's no excuse not to take yourself down to the shops and talk to people about things. It's not a reason for working people not to come together and demand more. There's been a lot of great achievements that have happened for working people over the term of this government so far, and there's a lot to fight for, and there's a lot at stake if a Liberal One Nation government was to win the next election in Victoria, because on those numbers, none of them are forming majority in their own right? So there's still a lot at stake. The game's hardly over. I'm hoping to get down there for November. I'll very happily knock on doors and hang out in Victoria and spend some time with you guys. But, like, it's not over by any measure. We're obviously going to be watching Victoria really closely and see how that message can be applied and just how soft the votes can be. And there's all those outcomes. I mean, it's anyone's race still, right?
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think one of the things that I think Labor people need to be very mindful of, again, at all levels of our movement, is, the media are not interested in us winning. Big business are not interested in us winning. We are the Labor Party. That has never not been the case. So if we are waiting for people to kind of come out in those sort of institutional parts of, the show and say, we want the government re-elected, it's not going to happen. But that's fine. It didn't happen in 14 or in 18 or in 22 either, and we won all of those elections. So, like, the power is ours, frankly, and we'll win or lose this election based on how organised we are, how good our campaign is, and how persuasive and forward-looking the policy agenda and the ideas that we have for the state are, and how we go about laying them out for people. Like, the rest of it's noise, and we should not listen to that.
You say, Lissie, that the media don't want Labor to win, but Luke Kinsella from the Australian Financial Review wrote an article over the weekend, and the headline was "Sydney's housing woes could be fixed by copying Jacinta Allen."
Slipped through the editorial net.
Yeah, I mean, I'm assuming that Luke got his marching orders Monday morning when they read that article. Anyway, but good on you, Luke. Clearly you're a comrade. But it was an interesting read, and there was a bunch of stuff over the weekend in the Fin and in the Age and the Sydney Morning Herald, just talking about housing. And we've been on about it since the budget, right? Everyone's saying this has been a shit budget and everyone hates it, right? But there's a lot of evidence coming out now that's starting to show that people rate what the decisions that the government have made around housing. So there was a Resolve poll that showed that there was an increase in support for stopping the current 50% discount on capital gains tax on investments. And that's, I think that was up like 5 or 6 points. There's an increase in support for restricting the negative gearing as well. There was an increase in total support for dropping the rate of the lowest income tax bracket from 16 to 15% from the 1st of July. So there's a little bits and pieces of evidence now that's suggesting that it's starting to sink in. Yeah, there's been a decrease in the auction clearance rates over the last couple of months, and that folks are starting to feel like, oh, I actually can turn up to an auction and maybe I'm a chance of actually winning something here. So I feel like there's a bit of a mood shift happening in the electorate around these changes that came out of the budget. So that's one thing that I just wanted to name. The second thing is then obviously, and I'll go to you first, Lissie, was this these sets of articles where Victoria sort of come out as the poster child around housing, less restrictive zoning than any other capital in the state, in the country. I'm not going to go into. I'll let you go into the more of the details, but basically, this was a favourable political analysis on what is actually happening in Victoria in terms of the housing and getting more supply.
Yes, a Labor government changed policy. There's more housing, and then the federal government changed policy, and it's getting cheaper. That is literally the point. Like we have been going on in this country now for years about the fact that we have a housing affordability crisis. That means that housing is too expensive. And by definition, that would mean the price of housing needs to come down. And yet we have suddenly gone from it's a crisis because it's too expensive to the world and the media and many others saying the world is literally going to end because the price of housing has started just gradually to come down again. Like that was the point. And the one thing I would say maybe to all governments in this country who are pulling levers in this space right now, please just say that was the point. You are trying to make housing cheaper. The point of more supply is to bring the price down. The point of the tax changes is to bring the price down. It is because it is too expensive for ordinary people to buy houses. That is why you are doing what you are doing. Get off the fence. Just say that's what you're doing. Do you want house prices to come down? Yes, you do. Everybody does. And I think that the kind of fence sitting is not helping anybody. But I think there's a stat in one of those articles you just mentioned, Stephen, which says that the average Victorian dwelling price has risen 85% since 2011. Wages have not gone up 85% since 2011. So by definition, that is an unsustainable equation for the majority of people who live in this country. But the other thing that you go with that is that's the third lowest rise of any state in the country. So that's not even the worst situation. It's much worse in Sydney, and now there's other capital cities that have overtaken Melbourne as well. So the Victorian government has been pulling a lot of levers in this space to try and get as much supply into the market as possible, and it's working. There are other states that are trying to do more in that space as well, and the federal government, bit down hard on the tax changes in the federal budget, got absolutely smashed for it. I think, frankly, could do more to say that it's doing what they want it to do than they have been. But it is a completely unsustainable crisis. Labor governments have taken action and we're doing something about it. Let's just say to people, it's working. It's going to take more time. It's going to take longer than this to fix everything, but it's going in the right direction because we picked you. We want you to be able to buy a house. That is the point.
My question then to maybe both of you is why do we think that some within the federal Labor government are struggling to say that so clearly? Like when they get asked, I saw Jim Chalmers getting asked questions about the drop in auction clearance rates, and he argued and said no, but it went back up again in the last month, which was true. But I would just, why didn't he just say, yeah, it's great. We want more people to be able to buy a home. This is a good thing. It's like as if the media are trying to corner and catch Labor out saying we're happy that housing prices are falling. We're happy. Why don't they want to say that? I don't understand.
Well, it is a gotcha to your point. But look, there is a cohort of people who already are in the property market, many of whom are, in possession of very large mortgages with their banks, for whom those people, admittedly, most of them do not want the price of housing to come down. But the reality is the way it's going it just cannot continue. It just can't. And I think that, I think you could probably make an argument that the government is trying to sort of not give the hard news message to either group. But the reality is they've made a choice. And I think on policy terms and just on, general practical common sense, they've made the right decision. take the credit.
Even when they, in this this accent poll, they asked folks about, the question was more specifically, would your preference for your house prices, including your own home, be keep rising, they stay about the same, they drop by 2%, there's a whole bunch of 2, 4, 5 to 9, 9 to 19, or drop by 20% or more, or undecided. Out of that group, only 15% said, I want it to keep rising. 23% said stay the same. 19% were like, I'm undecided. The rest actually wanted the price to fall
because everybody knows it's not viable, and even people who've got property know their kids can't get one, or their grandkids. It's just not.
Yeah.
The government will, the federal government will have made, through a very intensive budget process, a very carefully calibrated political calculation that the decisions they were making would have the majority of support from Australians. And clearly this poll has borne out they are correct about that. It can't keep going. The government's made the right decision about this. The government should back itself in and say that's why we did it.
Todd, you want to jump in on this, or are you happy to move on? What are you thinking?
I'm going to do a really rare thing for a bloke on a podcast and say I literally have nothing to add. That was perfect, Lissie.
Very good. Okay, let's wrap it up with we do our, I think it's watch list time, where I ask my two co-hosts to share something that they have been either reading or watching or consuming that can be, but not necessarily have to be in some sort of political theme. I'll go to you, Todd. What are you watching?
Yeah, I'm still in negotiations with my wife about this, but I'd like this weekend to do all of Sam Neill's back catalogue. Obviously pretty devastating news hearing of his passing yesterday. Sam Neill is just an absolute goat, like an incredible actor with a great sense of purpose and community, and was a lifelong union member and an incredible advocate for working people. I'm probably going to start with Jurassic Park because it sort of speaks to my childhood dream to be a paleontologist that was did not be achieved. I think also I'm going to try and check out Event Horizon this weekend, which I don't know if people have seen, but it's this really old school horror movie that Sam Neill was in. And there's this really cool thing where he plays a astronaut from Australia in the future, where he had the logo of the Australian flag redesigned and had the Union Jack replaced with the Indigenous flag. And that was his vision for what if Australia had become a republic, and in the future, what would our Australian flag look like? It's just like a really nice little Easter egg in the film.
That's cool.
So it is really cool. So I think that's this weekend with any luck.
What is your favourite Sam Neill film, Todd?
Almost certainly Jurassic Park.
The first one?
Oh, the first one. You can't go past it. It's incredible.
Great.
Scene where he's in the car, he's looking at the Bronchiosaurus and he's tapping and the whole thing.
Lissie, have you got a Sam Neill favourite? What's your favourite Sam Neill film?
I like Jurassic Park too, but the Velociraptor scene, when I saw it, it terrified me, and it's never not terrified me since. A great score as well, really good movie. The Dish is a good that's a great Australian movie too. So I reckon, people should get that into their Netflix or other streaming queues this weekend too.
The Hunt for Wilder People too is another one that's incredible. New Zealand one. That's so good. Cannot recommend that enough.
It's quite looking at his filmography, it's actually pretty extensive actually.
150 projects apparently.
Yeah. I mean, Death in Brunswick. Come on. Attack Force Z, which that's some childhood memories there as well. Very good. Let's see, what's on your watch list?
So this is a listen list rather than a watch list, but there is a podcast called Fourth Estate, which focuses on the media, who we've just spent the last hour roundly criticising. However, they do some interesting stuff, but one of the things they do is long-form interviews with sort of veteran journalists, and there's a really great two-part interview with Barry Cassidy, which I highly recommend to people. He is one of the reasons that I got interested in and got into politics. When I was a kid, he was the political editor of the 7:30 Report, and I thought I wanted his job, which turned out to be wrong, and I didn't. But nonetheless, I was of rapt attention as an 11-year-old or whatever. Monday to Thursday on ABC. But anyway, it's a really interesting interview from his time in the sort of starting in general news and then through the Victorian Press Gallery in the late 70s before he heads to Canberra for the first time in 1979, and then he becomes Bob Hawke's press sec, and then talks about his career in all his other roles. But it's a really good interview. He's a great interview subject. He's a great storyteller, and I highly recommend it. It's also got some great archival, I guess, audio footage. I've never heard Dick Hamer, who was the Premier of Victoria back in the 70s before, but they've even got recordings from back then, so it's quite cool. But yeah, highly recommend it. Barry Cassidy, superstar.
And what was the name of the podcast again? Not that we should be promoting other podcasts.
Sorry, I'm cross-promoting. Fourth Estate is the name of the podcast.
Fourth Estate, all out. Very good. I'm a terrible reader. I really am. I'm bad. I mean, I read, but I don't read books. Like, people before they go to bed or when they're in bed, they'll read a chapter, and I'm just not that kind of reader. But I've decided I need to start reading again, and I picked up a book that was on our reading list for Year 12 English, which was Graham Greene's The Human Factor when I was at Marist. And I remember at the time reading it and enjoying it, and I think I actually did my exam cat on it. And I picked it up again the other day, and I've almost finished it. And actually, I don't remember any of it. So when I was reading, I'm going, I don't recall any of this stuff. But I've really enjoyed it. And it's written in the 70s. It's got it's obviously about espionage. Graham Greene's, a lot of his books are about that. But it's there's a bit of a throwback to 1970s South Africa and apartheid, and sort of not revisiting that because it was written at the time. So it's real, right? It's not sort of like a reflection. It's actually living it through it, and just reminding me of, God, how bad apartheid was in South Africa. So there's a bit of a political thing to it. But I've enjoyed it so much that I mentioned this to someone the other day, and they said, you should read The Quiet American, which is obviously also very political because it's about Vietnam. So that is what I'm going to do next. But I'm enjoying going back into my childhood and reading old texts from high school. Okay, that is the end of today's episode. Thank you to our Patreon subscribers for sending in your questions. If you want to submit a question to our monthly mailbag episode, then you need to become a Patreon subscriber. And to do that, you just need to click on the link in the show notes and become a financial supporter of the podcast, which we really, really, really appreciate. And we also really value the questions that we get from our subscribers each month. So thank you to Claire and Paul and Andrew for your questions this month. Thank you to Todd and to Lissie for joining us again. As always, I'll see Todd, you in Adelaide for National Conference. And Lissie, are you coming over?
Not for National Conference. No, sadly, I have to work. Devastating. Yeah, I've organised myself very badly.
Right. Well, we'll see you in a month's time.
Yes.
Thanks very much, and everyone have a great week. Hey, Social Democrats. Thanks for listening. Today's episode was hosted by myself, Stephen Donnelly, and produced by Grace Eyre. If you like the show, please rate us and review us wherever you get your podcasts. And if you really like the show, then join our Patreon community for early and ad-free access to each episode. We regularly take questions and comments from our Patreon members, so get in there if you want to have your say. And finally, get all the latest updates and bonus content by following Socially Democratic on our social media channels. The links are in our show notes. See you next Friday.